At the last meeting, we had a report on Berkeley and Berkeley's finances, and it was asked that we take a look at over the next few meetings the other campuses to see how they stand. So over the next couple hours, we're going to be looking at three items, and the first of three in a series of campus presentations to give the board an overview on campus financial data, student performance, diversity efforts, and so forth at each campus. We'll be hearing from the other campuses over the next 2 or 3 meetings. This morning, I think each presentation plus questions is expected to last about, give or take, 45 minutes. I would ask that as we let each campus present, we have them present all the way through and then have questions with that particular campus. The first campus presenting is UC San Francisco, Provost Dorr, Nathan Brostrom, Chancellor Hawgood, and a number of folks, I think, joining the table to make the presentation.
Thanks, Chair Kiefer. And I think you laid out the purpose of the presentations and the protocol we're going to follow. We are going to let Amy and I are going to have the chancellors, the provost, campus CFOs, and in the case of medical centers, medical center CEO lead the presentation. I might just start by making a couple of overarching observations on the numbers, and they relate to some of the conversations we were having this morning. First, the figures that we are showing you are all drawn from our corporate financial reporting system, which supports our annual audited financial statements. As a result, they include a lot of non-cash items, the most significant of which is depreciation. And that explains why you may see, in some instances, a negative operating performance, but growing cash balances. We do not fully expense pension or retiree health liabilities. Instead, we just include the cash contributions that each campus makes, in this case 14% for UCRP and a pay-as-you-go for retiree health. Those system-wide liabilities are held at the center of the balance sheet. Second, the presentations also imply a degree of fungibility that doesn't always exist, either legally or in practice. On a campus, we have many fund sources that are either legally or by custom restricted. So campuses may show positive results in the aggregate, but financial strains in core budgets or specific departments or programs. And finally, as we were discussing this morning, the presentations focus mostly on the operating budget. We get a view of capital through the amounts on debt service and depreciation, but as Faculty Representative Dan Hare noted, we have significant needs for capital, both for enrollment growth, deferred maintenance, and seismic, and these are not addressed necessarily in this, and it's one of the greatest challenges we face over the next several years. Amy, did you want to?
Yes, thank you. So immediately following the financial presentation, each campus will have one slide about its efforts to advance degree completion and time to degree, and one slide about programs to improve campus diversity and inclusion. Each campus will cover all populations that are at the campus except staff. So the possibilities are undergraduate students, graduate academic students, graduate professional students, postdocs, and faculty. You'll see in the 3 campuses presenting today quite a range in what our campuses are like. UC San Francisco, with about 3,000 students, has no undergraduates and more graduate professional than graduate academic students. Its programs almost entirely are in the health sciences, and 99% of the degrees awarded are in STEM. In terms of faculty, UCSF, as is true for every campus that has a significant health science set of schools, UCSF has a different mix of faculty titles than you would find on the general campus. This is based on the ways in which the faculty are supported, the kinds of teaching and mentoring and clinical work that faculty need to do in the health sciences. This you will find on every campus that has a significant health sciences operation in future reports. Now, by UC standards, San Francisco is a very old campus. It's on a par with Berkeley, beginning in the late 1800s. UC Merced, the second campus you'll have, today is over 6,000 students. About 90% of them are undergraduates, and the rest are all graduate academic students. About 80% of the degrees that they award are also in STEM. By any standards, Merced is a very young campus, with its first class starting in 2005. The third campus today will be UC Santa Cruz. It has nearly 18,000 students. Like Merced, about 90% are undergraduates, and almost all the rest are graduate academic students. The disciplinary offerings at UC Santa Cruz are much more mixed, with just about 40% of the undergraduate degrees and 50% of the graduate degrees in STEM. Santa Cruz opened in 1965, so if we're talking about ages of campuses, we could say maybe it's sort of middle-aged. All three campuses featured today have fairly short presentations, and then they're ready to take all your questions and comments. Chancellor Hawgood.
Thank you, Amy, and good morning to members of the board. Let me first just introduce the team that's here. President and CEO of our health system, Mark Laret, Associate Vice Chancellor for Budget and Planning, Teresa Costantinidis, and Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost, Dan Lowenstein, and we'll be sharing the presentation and questions amongst us. This first slide provides some basic facts about our campus, UCSF. These statistics reflect the structural differences between UCSF and our 9 sister campuses, as Amy referenced. Most notably, we are a graduate and postgraduate campus only and have a singular focus on the life and health sciences. Therefore, respect to student enrollment, UCSF is the smallest of the 10 UC campuses. We offer master's and doctoral programs in the basic life sciences and in the social sciences. We also are well known for our professional degree programs in the health sciences. UCSF's 4 professional schools, dentistry, medicine, nursing, and pharmacy, and the graduate division consistently rank as top programs nationwide in their fields and attract the world's most talented students. Our Global Health Sciences program involved more than 200 faculty from across our 4 schools, and it prepares students with hands-on training for global health expertise and leadership. In addition to the student figures shown here, we host more than 1,000 postdoctoral students in the life sciences. Because of this relatively small student body, we have a relatively small alumni body. This has significant impact on our development and fundraising strategies. In patient care, our growing patient care enterprise currently experiences more than 1 million patient visits per year at UCSF medical students, with double-digit volume growth year over year in the last couple of years. We also see an additional 1 million patient contacts through our affiliations with Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital, the Safety Net Hospital here in San Francisco, and the San Francisco Veteran Affairs Medical Center. UCSF Health is recognized globally for innovative treatments, advanced technology, and pioneering research applied to patient care. Our team of almost 2,000 physicians includes leading experts in virtually all specialties, including cancer, neurologic disorders, immunologic disorders, HIV/AIDS, as well as all specialty services for women and children. Indeed, patients come to us from all over the Bay Area and indeed all over the world. Our health system has had a doubling in revenues over the last 6 years. The caliber of UCSF's research is well renowned. Our faculty have won nearly every leading prize in the health sciences, from Nobel Prizes to National Medals of Science. For nearly a decade, UCSF has earned its place as the top-funded public academic institution by the National Institutes of Health. Our research expenditures in 2015 exceeded $800 million. Regarding our faculty, notably only 15% are ladder rank, meaning that 85% receive no state support for their salaries, and 1/3 of our faculty do not belong to the system-wide academic senate. So after this statistical context for our campus, let me turn the presentation over to Associate Vice Chancellor Teresa Costantinidis to present our financial position.
Thank you so much, Chancellor. Before we get into the finances, I want to point out right up front that the Benioff Children's Hospital Oakland is not included in the numbers in this presentation. We wanted to match UCOP's published financials for this round, but Benioff Children's Hospital will show up in future reports and future presentations. BCHO adds about $500 million to both the balance sheet net position and also to our operating funds that we'll be looking at going forward. So looking at the balance sheet information, at UCSF, we really do keep a very close eye on the balance sheet. And as you can see in the top line on the chart, our overall cash position is very strong. Now, when you look within our organization, UCSF Health is dipping below its goals of daily cash on hand. The goal is 60, and we're in the low 40s right now. But we have a projection to increase that up into the level of 60 and above in the next 4 years. And the campus itself has an overall cash position well in excess of 160 days. So overall cash is doing well. The ownership of cash is dispersed across the campus, and we're developing new approaches to better manage this cash and utilize it to help the campus, including more self-borrowing rather than going out into the market. And we do that for our clinical and other revenue-generating research facilities. And we are also investing cash that hasn't been designated and is not needed in the short term in longer-term investments, such as our total return investment pool and the general endowment pool. Looking at the next line, capital assets, our investment in our capital facilities, which the Regents know a lot about, is reflected in the increases in capital assets shown here. These include the addition of the new hospitals at Mission Bay and also our Mission Hall building in that time period, which houses global health sciences, and also provides workspace for the faculty who are associated with the new hospitals. We will continue to aggress heavily in our physical plant over the next several years, and this includes a focus on addressing our deferred maintenance backlog. Happy to speak more about that if you have questions about our approach. Looking at the endowment line, we're very proud of the growth in our endowments, and it's something that we've, as a result of several banner years in philanthropy. And we're also building funds within funds functioning as endowments to support the long-term funding needs, both operating and capital, for the campus. On the debt outstanding line, at the end of 2014-15, we had $2.3 billion in debt, and we do plan to take on an additional $1.5 billion in debt over the next 10 years for the various processes that for the various projects that we briefed the Regents on. These are primarily related to seismic and life safety, but there's also program and housing projects that you've heard about. Our projections indicate we will continue to meet during this time period all three of the debt capacity tests and maintain adequate debt capacity for both unforeseen needs and the future needs that we're looking at beyond that 10-year period. We will access all three credit pools, general, auxiliary, and medical center, and we are actively looking at and engaging public-private partnership options. It's also really important to note that we have equity in our campus physical assets that you see up there, so our asset value compared to that debt is roughly twice the level of the debt. On this slide, we are now looking at the revenue and expense detail, and as you can see on the left-hand side, the total revenue, more than 80% of our revenue comes from two highly restrictive sectors. Patient care shown in orange, over 56%, and then research in the pink, that's about a quarter. Funding for these sources, for the most part, is purpose restricted, and these are the areas where the bulk of our expenditures naturally lie. At the top of the chart, you could see that the combination of state appropriations and student tuition and fees make up just 5% of our revenue. But these are very significant and critical sources of support for us for our educational, our teaching programs at UCSF. So because of this revenue profile, which is a bit distinct, we must aggressively pursue indirect cost recoveries to cover the cost of our research and also pursue philanthropy. We also work on the right-hand side to exercise and achieve cost controls across all of our operations. As you can see on that right-hand side, the expense, like all the other campuses, salaries and benefits do make up the lion's share of our expenditures. Universities, as you know, are people-driven, and we are no exception to that. Now we're looking at the operating results, the revenue expenses from the past at the top, and then looking forward into the future in this middle of the chart. So operations for recent years, you can see during the last 3 years, we have experienced really rapid growth in both revenues and expenses. Unfortunately, the revenue growth has outpaced the expense growth by just around a 1% difference there. Revenue growth has resulted from, as you might expect, increased net patient revenues, private gifts, and also growth in private contract and grant activity. The revenue drivers have also resulted, of course, in programmatic increases in expenses related to those revenues, and those actually, both of them are well above inflationary levels. You're looking at about a 17% growth in revenue and a 16% growth in expense through that time period. We have worked hard on cost containment efforts to help us maintain that positive net income during this time period, but we also have to recognize we have significant increases in depreciation and interest expenses related to our capital programs in that period. Now looking to the middle of the chart in our projections going forward to the future, it indicates a few tight years with relatively low net income given the size of our organization, and that is a result of the opening of our Mission Bay hospitals, where we've made investments in advance of the activities that will fund those. In addition, we're investing in strategic initiatives, affiliations, and notably new technology, really to help support those programs. This has the effect of decreasing the net earnings through fiscal year 2018. However, these are investments, and the future volume that comes from those and revenue growth will help improve our key financial indicators in future years after this time period. Slide number 6 shows you the assumptions that we made, and you'll be seeing this slide for all of the 9 campuses bringing the presentations, but we also want to show you that we've had to adjust some of these assumptions based on the variability of the different campuses. So for example, in the first column on the left, the state general fund's projection is actually 2.8%, which is based on the UCSF corridor that gives UCSF slightly lower state funds increase or below the 4% you'll see for other campuses, but then projections are that if we have downtimes, that we will be somewhat protected during those downtimes. So for the other one I want to point out to you is over on the right-hand side, the expense projection. So depreciation is much higher than you're going to see on other campuses because of that intense investment in our capital programs and depreciation there. All right, so now we're looking at the operations for the year 2014-15 broken out to the 2 components of our university, the campus side and the medical center side. And you can see the bottom line results, the title of the pages before, that the campus had a net income, positive net income of $115 million. But what's happening here is the med center essentially broke even. Now, as I mentioned before, these results for this year include the opening of the new hospitals at Mission Bay, which drove up the expenses. So these really show you the increase in expense, but not necessarily the increase in revenue that you're going to see coming forward. Also, we will see an increase in revenue from the backfilling of our Parnassus space that will add to the revenue going forward. It's important to note that in addition to that health system support that you see there, UCSF Health also provides significant support to the campus in several other ways, including strategic initiative funds to support campus programs and the campus at large, and also strategic support for the School of Medicine. Now I'm going to turn it back over to the Chancellor to talk about our strengths and opportunities.
Thank you, Teresa. I will briefly go over now what we see as some of the strengths of our financial position at UCSF and also some of the challenges that we face going forward. Importantly, we continue to hold a leadership position both nationally and internationally in the life sciences and in the delivery of health care. Our rankings across a variety of measures are consistently high, and in recent years, our professional schools have each achieved the top ranking for NIH research funding in their disciplines. Internationally, we are ranked number 2 in the world in clinical medicine and pharmacy. We're also a leader in philanthropy, and in fact, last year, in 2015, we ranked as the number 4 university in the country in philanthropic funding, and in fact, we're the only public university in the top 10. Our financial success is also predicated on measures we are taking to control costs and increase revenues. Both the campus and UCSF Health have developed a pervasive culture of continuous process improvement, and we are achieving operational efficiencies across patient care, academic, and administrative functions. We have successfully negotiated increases in our indirect cost recovery rate, going from 54.5% in fiscal year 12 to 58.5% in fiscal year 16, while also holding down the administrative costs of research. Our primary financial and administrative support organizations for the campus has declined from 12% of the total campus expense to 9.9% last year. We are investing, as Teresa mentioned, more in the general endowment pool at the Regents, in TRIP and our own facilities to better utilize our cash balances. And we are enthusiastic partners with UC Health in leveraging scale for value as a collaborative way of reducing costs across UC Health. That said, we do face a number of challenges. 80% of our revenue is generated from two highly competitive markets: healthcare delivery and research. Our health system operating performance is challenged by a high dependence and an increasing dependence on government payers, particularly Medi-Cal. Regional competition is fierce, and we must protect and grow our patient base through partnerships across the Bay Area and throughout Northern California. Our faculty are working hard and, in fact, are challenged by demands for clinical productivity, and this is a challenge for maintaining faculty satisfaction and morale. You are all well aware of the high cost of living in San Francisco, and this is challenging us on several fronts, including the recruitment and retention of the best faculty, staff, and students. But also, these high costs are challenges to address our various capital needs, including our deferred maintenance and renewal. While our endowment is strong relative to our public peers, we are well behind our private competitors, and much of our giving is from grateful patients rather than alumni. These donors tend to have specific interests, meaning that the unrestricted philanthropy available for strategic uses on the campus is modest. Finally, we have challenges in funding IT investments to support instruction, research, patient care, and our business activities. And we are taking bold steps to address those challenges. So now I'm going to hand it over to Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost Dan Lowenstein to present some highlights of our student achievements and diversity efforts. Dan.
Thank you, Sam, and good morning, members of the board. At UCSF, we are very proud of our strong completion rates for academic and professional programs, which are well above the national average. 80% of our PhD students who entered UCSF during 2000 and 2002 completed their programs within 10 years, which is up from 75% in earlier cohorts. And our most recent data on the campus indicate that more than 84% of those who entered between 2002 and 2006 completed their PhD within 10 years, and an additional 5% earned a master's degree. Now, our completion rates are well ahead of recent national comparison data, which indicate that just 65% of life sciences PhD students at private institutions and 62% of such students at public institutions complete in 10 years. We don't have definitive data on why that 15 to 20% of students leave, but many do so because they're actually pulled into the opportunity to join the workforce earlier or pursue entrepreneurial ventures, and a number of them do so for personal or health reasons. 90% of those who complete their degree do so within 7 years, and they take 5.7 years to complete on average. I'd also like to point out that we have exceptionally strong completion rates in our professional degree programs. Those rates exceed 95% for our MD, DDS, and PharmD programs, and our completion rate for our nursing master's program is 89%. And our graduates are able to secure prestigious and lucrative post-degree opportunities. We really strive to create an environment and support services necessary for students to succeed. And a few examples are on the slide in front of you. I won't go through those in any detail except to point out that we've made major efforts over the last couple of years to integrate these services as much as possible across all the schools across the entire campus. I just want to point out one particular bullet on the slide, which is the last one, and that is that you've heard at earlier meetings that the San Francisco housing market is particularly challenging for our students and everyone else in our community. We have longer-term plans to expand our on-campus housing stock through a new development near the Mission Bay campus, which I know you're quite aware of, additional housing at the Parnassus campus, and a partnership with UC Hastings for additional housing in the mid-market area of San Francisco. However, in the meantime, we needed to come up with some way of tiding over until those housing opportunities come on board. And we've been able to establish a temporary program that provides supplemental stipends to current students who are not able to live on campus to help them address the high cost of living in San Francisco. And early indicators suggest that this has become quite successful, very attractive to students who are being admitted to our schools. Now, this next slide covers programs to improve campus diversity and inclusion. We won't go over the data in detail, although it's available in the appendix, and we're happy to discuss this. But we are seeing improvement in our enrollment and hiring of women and underrepresented minorities, but we still have plenty of room for more improvement. We're making efforts to improve the climate among faculty, staff, and students, promoting training and support across all three populations, ensuring that faculty searches are inclusive, granting release time and support for junior and mid-career faculty. The slide describes some of the various efforts we have on the campus to improve campus diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Chancellor's Council on Campus Climate, Culture, and Inclusion meets quarterly and helps guide and continue our efforts to enrich our diverse culture, enhance personal, curricular, and professional development, and organization strategies to support and sustain a diverse and inclusive culture. We've just launched a 4-month diversity and inclusion certificate program as a professional development and training opportunity for staff. Our graduate division is engaged in fostering the pipeline for underrepresented minority students and the undergraduate, PhD, and postdoctoral levels, and this includes programs to build community through retreats, webinars, and mixers, national, regional, and local recruiting with faculty visits to STEM diversity programs at 13 UCs and CSUs, and meeting at the Advancing Chicanos, Hispanic, Native Americans in Science meetings and the annual Biomedical Research Conference for minority students. And expanding the pool and creating a welcoming environment. We provide travel support for those who are underrepresented in the life sciences, departure breakfasts, and many other activities. Faculty searches are another crucial segment of the pipeline, and we're working to ensure that all searches identify diverse pools. For example, we are just launching what we call equity advisors, which are faculty that are trained to really understand the academic search process through prior membership on department or campus committees, and then getting additional training through the Academic Affairs and the Office of Diversity Outreach on proper utilization of our various systems for academic appointments, training in unconscious bias, and the implementation of best practices to mitigate bias in the search process. And finally, the School of Medicine has established several programs, some of them really quite remarkable, to help support junior and mid-career faculty from groups who are underrepresented in medicine, and this program provides release time and very significant stipends and faculty support for those who are chosen.
So thank you, Dan. That ends the prepared remarks, and we would be happy as a group to take any questions.
Thank you. Regent Macarishian, then I have Regent Zettel and Regent Island.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, or want to understand what's going on. What is on slide 2? What is patient complex index? On the bottom. What is that?
Oh, the complexity index. That's a nationally recognized way of measuring the acute or the severity of the kind of patients that you are seeing. And an index of 2.07 is extraordinarily high. A standard community hospital would have a complexity index of closer to 1. The California median is 1.24, and this is a little bit like the Richter scale. It's not linear. Anything over 2 just reflects the incredible severity of the kind of patients that we see. So it's a way of correcting, for instance, expense and staff ratios so that you're not comparing
I understand.
a hospital in.
So you're saving lives, basically. A lot of lives.
We'd
Okay.
like to think so, yes.
My next question is, on page 5, you show on 2020 very, very high increase, jump in your, I guess, revenue by 2020. That's a huge jump. What causes that?
I'll make a comment, and then I'll perhaps ask Mark to make a comment, because it's primarily driven by the investments that we are currently making in the health system around expansion of our capacity. And we expect, while we're making the investment now, the revenues that those investments will drive will come in over the 2019-2020 year. This is a blend of the net income from the health system and the campus. We also see a more modest increase in the campus net income, but the rise here from a nadir of 2016 to that 2020 projection is driven primarily by volume growth on the health system. Mark, do you want to make any comments?
The only thing I'd add, Regent Makarichian, is that one of the activities that the Regents approved is the partnership of UCSF with John Muir Health to form something we call Canopy, which is an accountable care organization that's really a derivative of the Affordable Care Act. And the idea is that we're linking hospitals and physician groups together with an insurance license going to employers, including the University of California and John Muir Health and others, and enrolling individuals into this. So we're, in a way, diversifying our portfolio. And a major part of, or at least a significant part of the growth that's reflected here is the revenue that will come from that insurance product.
Okay, that makes sense. Then one observation, that's slide 7, and I just want to make sure that we all understand that when you look at it, it looks like medical center is not making that much money, but the campus is making a lot of money. But the reality is that you're taking money from medical center and putting it into campus, and the medical centers are a big supporting factor for all the campuses because we make money over there and pass it on for education. So I just wanted to point that out here. So.
You're absolutely right. As Mark knows, I like to couch that as an investment, as distinct from a strategic support, as we used to call it. Yeah. Much of it is investing back into the clinical enterprise because the physician salaries exist on the campus side. So it's both an investment back into the health system as well as an investment in our academic programs.
Right.
But you're right. It's very important.
One question that I have, you have on slide 4, you have on the left-hand side of your expenses, you have a huge 17% for other expenses. What is that category? That's a big thing for other expenses not be specified.
So one of the big things that shows up as an expense for us is when the research money comes in and we subcontract it out to other universities, it shows up as another expense. So that is one of the largest things in that area. So it really is a allocation of our research to partner universities that are doing work on our behalf.
So you get close to $1 billion, but we subcontract that out?
Essentially that's the kind of thing. They have partnerships where the contracting grant comes in as part of our $1.2 billion, and then we're in partnership with other universities.
Okay. All right. And that's obviously counted in your revenues, right, on the other side?
It is.
Okay.
There are other expenses other than research subcontracts in that bucket, but if you're interested, we could give you a greater
We had
breakdown.
Regent Zettel and Island Oakley also before you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to, first of all, commend you for the campus environment. I was pleased to visit the campus, and I was so impressed by your commitment to excellence in all you do, but also your focus on mission and your focus on public service. It was just clear that you hold that in everything you do. I do have a couple questions with regard to the campus climate and culture. Two questions. First of all, with the Chancellor's Council on Campus Climate, Culture, and Inclusion, do you think that will translate into making your retention and completion of doctoral candidates, which is now 80% and very, very high? Do you think that will continue to bump up with these efforts, and are you tracking those?
Well, we certainly track the numbers. I'll make a comment and then let Dan comment as well. I actually don't think our 85% completion rate is, well, at least I would strongly like not to think it was associated with any climate issues. I think it is more that we live in such an incredibly entrepreneurial environment that many of our PhD students move into biotech or start their own companies often before they've even completed their degree. So we are tracking that, but I honestly, while we are driven to increase and improve our climate, I don't think it's influencing our completion rates.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't know the statistics for comparative institutions, but given the environment of excellence and support that we provide, there must be some ceiling effect here, that there's going to be a certain number of students who really do seek other opportunities.
Okay. And the second question is, expanding on that, are you tracking why people leave their doctoral programs? What is the reason?
We're just starting to do that. We have historically not done that, so we don't have any historical data, but Liz Watkins, our Dean of the Graduate Division, is now focused on that issue.
Because I would think that the importance of the student advisors that oversee their doctoral program, that relationship is so important. I would hope that they are having training to make sure that
they are.
Excellence
and again,
in
just
their
to put it
practices.
in context, our completion rate is 85% compared to a national average in the same kind of PhDs of in the mid-60s.
Great, thank you very much.
We have 6 regents who have asked to be recognized: Regent Island, Regent Oakley, Regent Blum, Regent Regent Ramirez, and Regent Richmond. So, Regent Island.
Thank you. First, Chancellor Hawgood, let me say that you are the leader of a premier institution. We have much to be proud of relative to your campus and in particular your leadership. But I wanted to focus on the slide on your diversity programs and diversity efforts. Thank you for providing that information, but you didn't provide any data. So I have no way to judge whether your programs are effective or where you stand relative to student diversity, faculty diversity. Could I get a comment on that? And
Sure.
in
So the
particular,
data
if you have any
is-
information to share, I'd like it.
Mm-hmm. The data is in the appendix that we could go through now, but let me just perhaps show a couple of slides and have Dan comment, and then I'll ask Dan also to comment on data that's not in your appendix, but is our most recent faculty hire data that I think shows we're starting to move the needle. But
Yes,
let me
please.
just show you
15, I think. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, or what about this one, Dan? If you want to just comment on the progress we're making on this. This is student, both graduate academic on the top row and graduate professional on the bottom row.
So two slides to get at the data that you're asking for. This one shows the progression of the underrepresented in life sciences and professions over the course of fall 2000 to fall 2015. The top row shows graduate academic, that would be primarily our PhD programs, and the bottom the professional, which would be MD, DDS, PharmD, and nursing. And as you can see, we are clearly seeing a trend upward over the course of the 15 years. Still not where we want to be, but moving in the right direction. So that's for our student body. The slide right before, this shows the same data in the first two bars currently for our graduate students, first bar, the professional students, the second, then our postdocs, and then our faculty. And again, over time, we've seen a modest improvement, and I'll underline very modest, in terms of Hispanic Latino hires, and very little change in terms of African Americans. Of note, this particular slide shows our ladder rank in residence and clinical ex-faculty. It does not show the other 50% of our faculty who are in the clinical arena, and the diversity in that group is actually somewhat higher. The other thing that Sam was alluding to is we've actually taken a look, and this is not in the appendix, but we're interested in what our new hires look like. And the data that we have most recently is in the hires of the last 2 years, 2014 to June of this year. In ladder rank hires, which by the way only represent about 5% of our faculty in terms of turnover. In ladder rank, the underrepresented faculty hires were at about 5%, but 10% when we include in residence and clinical ex. So our total faculty new hires in terms of underrepresented in life sciences and medicine is actually about 11% over the last 2 years, which we're quite pleased about.
So Eddie, another way of thinking about that is that our faculty turnover rate is about 5 to 6% per year. So on a base of 2,500 faculty, about 5 to 6% turnover every year. So no matter how aggressive we are in new hires, it's going to take a while. But in the last 2 years, the underrepresented faculty that we're hiring now are double the existing faculty. So it's still going to take a while because of that low turnover rate. But I think the new programs we've put in place are starting to show some pickup.
Just one quick follow-up. Could you provide some context to the difference in ladder rank faculty and non-ladder rank? I'm having trouble understanding how to evaluate that. Is that a good thing, that percentage you gave, a bad thing, neutral, irrelevant?
So this is I was on faculty for about 20 years before I even pretended to begin to understand this issue. So the term ladder rank refers to tenure. That represents about 15% of our total faculty. So we have a very low tenure percent. That's not uncommon in medical schools. You'll see very different numbers from the general undergraduate campus. 85% of our faculty have no tenure. And then the other distinction is academic senate versus non-academic senate. There are 4 academic tracks, including ladder rank or the tenure track. 3, ladder rank, and 2 non-tenured but still considered academic senate tracks, where you have some additional security of employment. And then there is the health science track, where if you are hired predominantly as a clinician, although you have teaching and often research responsibilities, but your predominant role is to be a clinician, which for us is about 30% of our faculty. They are not, because of system-wide rules that we have actually opposed in the past unsuccessfully, they are not members of the academic senate. So there's all these nuances. We consider all members of our faculty equal. We like all of our children. And so when we look at success in diversity, we really don't distinguish greatly amongst tracks. We think about who's in our community.
We have Regent Oakley, Regent Blum next.
Mr. Chair, it's on the same point. I don't know if it makes any difference to you.
Objection to that, if you want. I'll recognize you, Regent Perez.
Thank you, just because that way we can move on to the next topic. 2 things. One, I want to push back a little to the concept of not making distinctions between ladder-ranked and non-ladder-ranked, and maybe I misheard it. But I think there's an important distinction in terms of guarantee of employment once you're tenured. And so having a base that is diverse enough of faculty members that have guaranteed employment does make a difference to the culture of a campus and how desirable a place it is for others who are diverse to come, whether as students or as faculty members. So I appreciate from a management perspective wanting to embrace all members of the faculty equally, but especially with respect to questions of diversity, I think it's important to disaggregate this information. The second is, I would hope you would repeat the numbers for the last year that you talked about, because the way I heard them were concerning, not celebratory.
So for the last 2 years, from June 2014 to June 2016, faculty hires in the category that we call underrepresented in medicine. For new ladder-ranked faculty, 5% are underrepresented in medicine. For the total number of faculty that we hired, it was 11.1%. If we just take a snapshot of what our faculty looks like right now, ladder rank underrepresented is 5.6%, total faculty is 5.9%.
So in the underrepresented in medicine, the new hires are actually less diverse than the pre-existing, 5.9%, 5.6% versus 5%. So we're roughly keeping pace.
Well, again, if we look at the total faculty that we're hiring, independent of their rank, of their track.
No, but in the first category where you talked about underrepresented in medicine.
Yes. In the new hire, if we just take a snapshot of what we look like today in faculty, underrepresented medicine is 5.9%. In the new hires in the last 2 years, it is 11.1%.
Maybe I'm not tracking correctly, because as I heard you say it, you bifurcated the hires in the last 2 years. In the first category, I thought I heard you say that in underrepresented in medicine, in that one category, the new hires from June of 14 to June of 16 were 5%.
No, 11.1%.
I heard that as your second category, so I appreciate the clarification.
Okay, so let me be precise. In the last 2 years, in ladder rank, it's 4.5% underrepresented. In total faculty, it's 11.1%. So in ladder rank, you're right, we're treading water for the last 2 years.
Right. So if we could go back to the previous slide with the pie charts. This is of some concern to me, because it seems to me that, even given what you said, the greatest period of success was between fall of 5 and fall of 10. And then we've backslid marginally with respect to graduate academic in fall of 15. But in either case, even if you want to call that even from 10 to 15, the improvements in both the graduate academic and the graduate professional, the marked improvements are between 5 and 10. So my question is, what were we doing between 5 and 10 that accounted for, with respect to URMs and graduate academic, a move from 3% to 18%, which is worth celebration, and in graduate professional from 8 to 16. That's some real movement in that 5-year window. We haven't done any better since. In one case, we backslid a point, in the other we moved forward a point. Let's call that treading water. But what were we doing between 5 and 10 that showed that success? Have we stopped doing it? Has it just given us less of a yield? What can we learn from that experience?
Again, I'll comment and then Dan can add. I think between 5 and 10 was a concerted recognition across the entire campus in all of the schools in the graduate division that we were really underperforming. It became a sort of a consciousness raising between 5 and 10. A lot of work was done between 5 and 10, resulting in that success. That work has continued, but I would say the easy pickup occurred between 5 and 10, and now the work, every incremental increase now is just much harder. Plus, essentially every school in the country is focused on this right now, so the competition is fierce.
Thank you. I would invite us to look at the intensity between 5 and 10 and to see if there's anything we could do to increase our increments.
The predominant reason that we do intensive surveys of students that we offer who elect to go elsewhere, and when we look at the underrepresented who we offer but go elsewhere, the predominant reason is cost of attendance. We cannot compete, and they're predominantly, I would say, and we have good data on this. I'm going to give you a number that may not be totally accurate because I'm pulling it out of my memory, but 90% of the students that we lose go to private schools where they have total cost of attendance covered.
And the only pushback I would have on that, and I understand, because that's the problem for us in many areas of recruitment, it gets back to the first point in terms of looking at the distinction between ladder-ranked and non-ladder-ranked, and in particular, looking at the distinction of what our tenured faculty look like, because that's an element of consistency within campus culture. And I will tell you, and I won't tell you where I'm pulling my numbers out of, that establishing a baseline of community also is impactful in landing the students we admit, above and beyond economics.
I don't dispute the general tenor. I would just go back to, on our campus, because of our heavy clinical presence, the majority of the faculty the students are interacting with are not the tenured faculty. So we need to be looking at the entire body.
All right, I'd like to move on to Regent Oakley and Regent Blum.
Thank you, Chair Kiefer. I will try to be as brief as possible. Make a few comments. First of all, I want to thank Regent Perez for his comments. Two, this whole discussion about faculty, their association with the Senate, I think it's a very important discussion that we just glossed over. I'd like to come back to it at some point in time in the future. I think it's an important discussion for all the regents to understand how our faculty are divided in these various categories. Three, on the issue of diversity, and although my comments are directed to you, Chancellor, because you're sitting there, they're really directed to all the chancellors. I want to go back to the conversation that I brought up at the last meeting when we received a report on accountability. And I'd like us to think about shifting the language and the culture that we have in the university when we discuss diversity. We use words and phrases that are really ubiquitous now throughout the language we use in higher education. You know, we strive, we talk about modesty, we talk about all these, we use all these words that really at the end of the day don't tie in any way to accountability. And we have to become more intentional. We have to become more intentional about where we want to be, not where we are, and talk about why we are striving toward, you know, where we think we should be. We need to be intentional about where that marker should be. Where do we want to be? We don't act as people, regardless of what the issue is, until we know where we want to be. This state doesn't act on cutting back water usage until it's Armageddon. We need to declare Armageddon here in our university. We need to declare a state of emergency in our university and set that marker and have the courage to set a marker so that we can judge ourselves and be accountable to ourselves. Yes, there are many reasons why it's very difficult to get to a goal. But as long as we don't set a goal, we can wash our hands and have these discussions year after year after year. So again, I'm not picking on you, but I'm going back to the discussion we had last time. These are the reasons why we will get to a report in another year and have the same outcomes. Until we decide that we're going to be intentional about setting specific targets of what we want to look like. Because if we just continue down this road, we will never, ever reflect what California looks like. We won't even come close. Part of this change is just natural demographic change. So I would like us to really become more intentional and really have the courage to set goals of where we want to be, not talk about the future as some undefined place we want to be somewhere down the line. And then the last thing I'd say is when you talk about the value of the university and the strengths, I think one component that's missing, and it's probably missing for all of our universities, is the public value that we create. So for example, how is your university supporting underserved communities who don't have the kind of health coverage that we would like them to have? What is our public role in that? And how can we help move that dialogue forward and provide the support that communities like the Central Valley and others need in terms of health care? So thank you.
I'll make two brief comments, and I'm happy to send you the information after the meeting. School of Medicine, which has 2,100 of the 2,500 faculty, so is 85% of our entire faculty campus, has indeed set a numeric specific goal with metrics and accountability for every chair in the school to achieve those goals, and a commitment of tens of millions of dollars to get to those goals. So I'm happy to share that program with you. We have done exactly what you are suggesting. I'm loath to give you the goal right now because I can't remember, but I will send it to you when I get back to my computer. On the public service, we couldn't agree more. A couple of, two very brief examples. We provide all of the physician services at San Francisco General Hospital, which is the safety net hospital here in San Francisco. So every underserved patient in San Francisco is seen by a UCSF physician. And a second program that I'm very proud of is what we call our student education partnership, where our graduate students and our faculty provide pro bono teach the teacher in science support for 95% of all public schools in the county of San Francisco. And that program is going to celebrate its 30th year anniversary this year. And all of my sister campuses have similar programs, and perhaps we should do a better job at codifying them for you.
Regent Blum.
What I have to say is a very personal note. First of all, let me say UCSF in the last month has saved my life, and I'm going to be fine. So I am up at UCSF 5, sometimes 6 days a week, and so I've had the opportunity. By the way, I've been watching UCSF all my life. I actually was born in Mount Zion. My kids were born up on the hill. And I see what this university, I mean, there's 1,000 reasons to be proud of the University of California. And God knows I spend most of my time at Berkeley, but UCSF and what they've accomplished, we're talking about all this stuff, and I'm not saying it's important. Does anybody know how good we are in neuroscience? Do you know why Sandy Weil has just given us $185 million and for a new neuroscience building that some of us had to fight to get the first one done 7, 8 years ago? You know, Mark Benioff's not an idiot. He's given us $150 million. This is serious stuff. This university, UCSF, is as good as any place in the nation. And I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about this stuff, but sometime I go there 5 days a week, not because I want to, but I meet hundreds of people, I don't know, doctors, nurses, people that are cleaning up the place. They couldn't be nicer. I'd like to find, if I had something negative to say about the place, I don't know what it would be. And you know me, I'm not necessarily a cheerleader. But God damn it, you ought to understand what these people do. Quit bitching about all this little thing and go up there and understand how goddamn good UCSF is, because they're the best. Thank you.
All right, we have student Regent designate Paul Monge, and then followed by Regent Ramirez, staff advisor Richmond, and Regent Sherman. And then I'm going to try to, let's bring it to a close and move on to the next.
So thank you for the wonderful presentation. I'm a longtime resident of San Francisco, and I know how incredibly difficult the housing market is, not only for our students here, but also for UC students across the state. And I was really encouraged to learn about the creation of the cost of living supplemental program. I think that could possibly serve as a model that we can then bring to scale across some of our other campuses, so I'm encouraged by seeing that its development. I had a few questions in terms of its administration. The first just being in terms of the selection of recipients. Is this based on a need-based model, or what are some of the eligibility criteria? Two other quick questions. Will the fund be acting as a one-time emergency response, or is it an annualized disbursement? And the third is, how many students are you anticipating to reach on a yearly basis?
Yeah, great questions. So the fund it's defined by a pretty simple model, and that is we look at what the actual cost of living is for on-campus housing and what the average cost is across the city, and that delta is what's provided per year, and it's for all the years that the student's going to be with us at UCSF, so it's not an emergency fund. It is needs-based, although we do have an arbitrary cap for this first year set at 1,500 students, because we had no idea how many students were actually going to apply. I just saw the data yesterday, and it looks like about 1,350 or so students have applied as of now, so we're actually not going to reach that number, which means we're going to provide for everyone who's requested. Although if we did exceed 1,500, we would make it needs-based, and that's part of the application. So, and the plan is to continue this on an interim basis as our housing comes online over the next number of years. So this is meant to be a stopgap to handle the deficit until the actual capital programs are completed.
And all graduate students are eligible, including
Correct.
postdoctoral and okay.
Right. In fact, in addition to this, for all of our students, our graduate dean, Liz Watkins, was able to come up with what's called a relocation allocation fund, which she's experimenting with, which is $4,500 offered to all the incoming graduate students to handle the cost that you have when you arrive in a new city and have to figure out how to come up with the cash for first-time payment for an apartment.
Thank you.
Doesn't include postdocs.
Regent Ramirez.
Thank you for that. Actually, we were kind of going back and forth about this question, so I'm also enthused about that. I also appreciate the questions from folks about tenured, non-tenured faculty, the diversity within sort of those subgroups and how that matters. I actually have a question around the equity and inclusion programs, specifically the staff diversity program, and I want to put it in relation to the CUCSA presentation this morning, where they talked about some of the training that they have offered. And I want to echo Regina Mathis is the incoming chair of CUCSA. What gets measured gets done. What gets measured gets done. So I wanted to ask this piece on the, there's a place for staff to get this diversity training and cultural competency training, but I don't see the place where your faculty at any rank or the students, grad professionals or postdocs, are getting this cultural competency training. And what I want to talk about is, again, these are services providers, right? Nurses, doctors, dentists, pharmacists, folks that are with other folks in very intimate settings. So cultural competency translates into bedside manner, the quality of care that we provide folks. So I wanted to hear a little bit more about where are the graduates, the professionals, the postdocs, where is your faculty getting this training from, and do we have an idea of how we want to provide it for them? Because I feel like staff are enthusiastic. They do this voluntarily. They go and they engage in the training, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about how your faculty feels about it. And then I have a comment after that.
Yeah, so again, a great question. In particular, focusing in on the faculty who interact with our students and making sure that we facilitate their understanding of the issues that our students face. We've had a number of programs for many years coming out of the Office of Diversity and Outreach that provide the kind of training that you're mentioning. But beginning this year, we have an entirely new curriculum in the School of Medicine that's being modeled by the other schools called the Bridges curriculum. And as part of that, the faculty who are a part of the Bridges curriculum are undergoing diversity, equity, inclusion training. It's a formal part of their experience.
So, and then this is just a really quick anecdote on the staff presentation earlier. I don't know if anybody caught it, but there was a picture in there actually of me. I have 4 years of service in UC where I received a staff diversity certification program. So I was featured in that presentation. I don't know if anybody caught it. I don't even know if Cookson knew that that was actually me in the picture. But I wanted to say that the programs, when implemented, when people attend, you come out different. You come out different, and you come out providing a different quality of care. And I think my emphasis for this piece for the students, the grads, the postdocs, and the faculty is that I would like to see that throughout all of our UC folks. So just real quick, thank you.
Okay, Staff Advisor Richmond.
So I don't want to beat a dead horse. I realize this is a presentation on finance, but I want to associate myself with Regent Ramirez's remarks about what gets measured gets done. And while we appreciate the nature of the discussion, we ask about the absence of any data on staff diversity in the appendix, in consideration to the fact that staff has a great deal of interaction and impact on faculty and students, and interact with students as much as, and in some cases more than, faculty do.
Thank you.
I'll make a quick comment, and Amy may want to comment. We track our staff diversity data very, very carefully. There was, I think, a decision not to include it in these particular presentations for all 10 campuses.
That's correct, and it follows from the earlier last meeting where what we agreed to do and what we do need to do is a session that is about staff entirely, because as we were having the discussions about the different kinds of faculty that are found in health sciences, the differences increase when you do staff, quote, staff versus academic appointees. And it's easier to try to talk about what are the issues, what looks good, if we do it more together. And we concluded last time that we just couldn't handle the scope in one presentation, and that was one reasonable cut. And then we decided to continue that decision into this discussion, particularly because, as you said, the main driver for the presentation is about finances and how are the campuses doing financially, and what do they need into the future to succeed in what are still challenging, changing financial times. So that's the explanation, right or wrong, for what it was, and I know that we can talk about it offline too.
All right, thank you. Last comment before I make a couple of comments is Regent Sherman, or questions?
A question actually for Nathan on this. Nathan, as we look at all the campus operating results as we're going to see, how much is not allocated to the campuses that's at UCOP? What is that number, the magnitude of that?
Well, the main thing that is not allocated are the liabilities in both pension and other post-employment benefits, primarily retiree health. And so, in total, that is about $29 billion that we retain and we do not pass out. And then there's a small amount of debt that we have also taken on system-wide that we keep centrally. We do an assessment of that, but it's not included in a campus balance sheet.
But on a annual operating basis, how much expenses, if you will, are at UCOP that doesn't get allocated down to all the individual campuses?
Oh, we're going to have a presentation on that next, but the funding methodology for UCOP is backed by an assessment of the campus. So it's you take the total amount of unrestricted expenses at UCOP, and then it's divided a third by the amount of revenues, a third by the number of students, and a third by the number of staff.
So it's all absorbed in
Yeah,
these
except for
operating
restricted expenses. So, there's investment fees, there's bond fees. Those we cover our own expenses.
And then a comment for Sam about the philanthropic activity that you've generated with such a low alumni network is astounding. So maybe you can kind of give us just a little sense. Is it really just a grateful patient that, like Dick or anybody else that comes and then writes you a big check, or what is kind of the activity that generates these kind of things?
Well, I think I should first just admit that we live in a region that is doing extraordinarily well economically right now, and I think we're undoubtedly seeing benefits of that. But that said, We have put tremendous efforts into our fundraising team. Number one, we've built an extraordinary team starting from the very top with Vice Chancellor John Ford, who came in with tremendous experience, having served in that role for 20 years at Stanford. We were able to convince him to take a significant decrease in compensation to serve in that role. He's built a terrific team. And then he's worked very hard with both senior leadership, with Mark and myself, the other deans, and our faculty to really, I think the most profound thing that he has brought is an understanding that we will all do better together if we don't think about our own individual interests in philanthropy and think about the institutional priorities. And that way we've been able to build much bigger ideas that are attractive to donors than I'm just your doctor and I need an endowed professorship. We've been able to get the organization to understand that success comes from building really, really big ideas and then spending the time and effort that's required to take those ideas to donors and turn them into reality. You know, Regent Blum mentioned the wonderful gift from Joan and Sandy Weil, but that was a little over 2.5 years in the making. So it's perseverance as well.
All right, thank you. The comments that have been made on diversity are critical, and it's probably one of, if not the #1 issue of our time in the state in terms of what we'd look at the future. But I want to make sure that we're focusing enough on the finance of these, because when we came to this discussion, Nathan, it was after the Berkeley discussion, we ought to take a look at the finances of all of it. So a couple of questions on finance, and then in the next set of meetings, which were discussions after lunch on Santa Cruz and Merced, I'm going to ask for questions after the financial, and then after the rest of the report as well. Cash on hand, the goal is 60, but you've got 40-something. Is 60 the right number? That seems low to me. What's the world say about that?
If you are a standalone medical center, a standalone hospital, rating agencies really want to see 180 days cash on hand, 6 months cash on hand. We have done very well with the rating agencies on two fronts. One is by blending the cash that the campus has with the medical center. So the cash that Mark has is in the 40s, but moving up to the 50s. But if you combine that with campus cash, it gets close to the 180. It's, what did you say it was, Teresa? 160. 160. We also have done very well with them by blending it on a system-wide basis. And so the fact that we have this sort of a self-imposed limit of $5 billion in STIP has worked well with the rating agencies. But it is something that we have to continually watch as we start looking at things like, you know, borrowing again for UCRP, or as Chancellor Hawgood mentioned, some of the self-borrowing that they're doing. We have to make sure that we have enough liquidity in the system.
Yeah, and I think we have to keep recognizing how much we're entwined with each other. So, and how much we're dependent on the health systems for their support. And this starts to unwind. So I'm uncomfortable with that 45, 50 days to myself. But depreciation, that slide had said net of depreciation, right? Or not including depreciation on what our bottom line numbers were.
Well, depreciation is included in the operating numbers, and that's why you did see, that's one of the biggest contributors to their reduction in net income, because when the Mission Bay hospitals came on, depreciation jumped dramatically, just based on the asset value. So, you know, in theory, the operating numbers look a lot better. That being said, you know, depreciation really is a measure of what you should be plowing back into renewal of your assets in order to keep them at that value.
Yeah, so when we're talking about all the maintenance needs of the campuses, we're measuring those, we're forecasting them through depreciation. So we should always be seeing that, at least, and be aware of that need. That's what we're not necessarily always taking a look at.
Yeah, I mean, I would counter a little bit in that depreciation is an accounting standard, and sometimes it doesn't, you know, the term that you use for depreciation is not what you would use in practicality, but you're right, that's the number we sort of look at as what you should be putting back in.
Okay, any other thoughts. I think we've wrapped up. We're going to take a break for lunch, I think, and that's the Committee of Finance for the moment.
Yeah, thank you. And before we break, I also want to thank the presenters and certainly you, Chancellor Hawgood. The purpose of this was really for the Regents to get a sense of what is the outlook for each campus. And I think from a financial projection point of view, clearly very well run, high-level growth on the revenue line, strong management of your expense line. And then the fact that you have outlined for us what your challenges are and are very clearly looking at what are some of the pressures that will be coming down the line. You know, we've said before what you can't improve, what you can't measure. Focus matters. And I think, you know, we see a very strongly well-led campus, great opportunity in front of it, clearly some external pressures, including some of the financial pressures that you've already outlined for us. But I want to congratulate you and your team for really an extraordinarily good job in terms of managing UCSF.
Thank you very much, and I think on behalf of our team, we really appreciate the discussion from everyone that contributed, and we'll take some lessons back and get some additional information back to you.
Okay, so we'll break for lunch, and be ready to start no later than 1:30, please. Thank you.
Janet, are you tied up now?